7. Remember that we don't have. Oh wait, that's not true. I'm thinking of micros. Never mind. 5 through 9, I believe. All right. Let's see here. We are getting into the big granddaddy of macro. Is it 6 through 9? Okay.
Yeah, we did 2, 4, 15, and 2, 15.
That's right, because we had unemployment and yeah, so 6 through 9. 6 through 9. Okay. So we left off last time looking at the long run aggregate supply curve. So what we're trying to think about is what the potential for the economy is. Build up. Maybe I'll even take one step back here. What was this thing talking about here? What was this called? Time, real GDP. There's a word for it. No, we've got real GDP, so we've taken into account inflation. So we've got quantities of goods and services.
In that case, it'd be economic growth.
And economic growth. So we had this idea that over time, real GDP is growing, right? And so we had this trend line. And so I still haven't heard actually what this cycling motion is all about. What do we call this thing? The business cycle. Good. The business cycle. All right, and so this is the ups and downs of the economy. We've got a peak and a trough, recession, expansion. So these are the ups and downs that we're trying to get a fix on in this class to see, what causes those ups and downs, or can we get a grasp on it? Over time, the United States has tended to grow. So in chapter I gotta think here, 7. We talked about economic growth and long-term growth, and that Japan's been growing faster on average over the last 40 years and has kind of caught up to the United States, all that stuff. And so in this chapter, what's kind of helpful to think about is this is maybe kind of the long-run potential. The potential for the economy. If we're operating efficiently, then we're thinking about long-term growth, but in the short term, there could be these ups and downs. All right. So real GDP now in this chapter is being measured on the horizontal axis, and we're looking at the price level. And what we left off with last time was thinking about what we call the long-run aggregate supply. So it's kind of like the supply of goods and services, but what's kind of strange is we're taking all goods and services in the economy because we're looking at real GDP. And this vertical line was getting at what last time? What's the relationship between the two? It's fixed, right? So there's only a certain amount that we can have in the long run. So these two concepts kind of tie together in that we've got over time, we've got this fluctuation. This, however, is at a slice in time. What does it look like today if we kind of froze time? Well, we only have so many resources and technology. And so at any given point in time, we're kind of looking at this much that we could have, right? The total value of output, our potential for the economy. All right, so this ends up being an important anchoring point. And so let's write some of that out here. So long run aggregate supply, the LAS curve, long run aggregate supply, shows the economy's level of real GDP when there is full employment. Full employment of resources. Shows the economy's level of real GDP when there is full employment of resources. Now, this touches on some of the chapter 5 stuff a bit. What does it mean to have full employment? So the natural rate of unemployment gives us the full employment rate, right? So remember, we didn't want to have an objective of 0 unemployment, but rather we expect some employment to be there. And so if we have all of those people, if we're at the full employment level, then we would be expecting to be operating closer to efficiency.
So if we're saying full employment of resources, doesn't that technically mean we could be at the natural unemployment rate but be using other resources differently to not be at the long
To
run
not
act?
possibly be there, yes.
Okay.
Yep. And that's what I kind of opened the door with. For the most part, I want to be thinking about full employment from a labor perspective, because we'll end up tying that back to the labor market. But in theory, are we using other resources efficiently too? And so labor's being used efficiently. If we are at the natural rate of unemployment, then we're using labor efficiently. And so it kind of covers that resource. Okay. Anything else there? So the important part is, kind of the key point, and let me just put YP, the potential real GDP, which we're going to use the notation YP, sometimes I'll put a star up there, I guess. Okay, usually do. Potential real GDP is independent of the price level. And that's why we have its shape the way we do. And what I kind of want to stress is that this highlights the physical constraints we have. This highlights the physical constraints of the economy. Real resources make real stuff. Money is just paper that helps facilitate trade, and so is prices. But we really have these physical constraints that limit the amount of stuff we can have. All right, questions or comments on that? So this was the thing I think I left you with, was similar to the production possibilities frontier. So the production possibilities frontier, I guess, what the heck, since I'm on a roll here, we'll just recall the production possibilities frontier. The long-run aggregate supply and the production possibilities frontier of Chapter 2 are very similar in nature. Right? So we had beer and pizza, and we can only have so much beer or pizza. We can be anywhere along here, bear in mind. Points A, B, and C along the production possibilities frontier are all equally productively efficient. Right? They were all representing efficiency. But if we like beer a little bit more than pizza, then A might be preferred to C. But they're all equally productively efficient. That's what's going on here. We're being on the edge of the production possibilities frontier. So the edge of the PPF is similar to the potential level of real GDP for the economy. That's our connection. All right, so I think an interesting issue to figure out is the shape of that. Those of you who had micro class, we drew at least 100 of these in our notes of a supply curve that was upward sloping, right? So an upward sloping supply curve, and the gist of that was that businesses are willing to supply more pizza if they can get more money for pizza. So in Ottawa here, if they were able, and this is not them setting the price, but we want to think about the market price. If for some reason there was an increase in demand for pizza and they were able to get, on average, $35 for a large pizza, they're like, hey, I'm willing to supply a bunch more. I'm going to move from this point of 100 pizzas, and I'm going to ramp up my production to 180 pizzas. Right? That was the law of supply. So as price goes up, they're willing to supply more. Now, this kind of flies in the face of that and says, well, how do we reconcile the two things? So let me put out a challenge question for those of you who had micro. What was one of the key things that as pizza prices rose, we moved from point A to point B? What were some of the things that we held constant in order for that to happen? So the law of supply says as prices rise, I will increase the quantity supplied, ceteris paribus. So I'm kind of thinking about those ceteris paribus things, the things that we held constant. What were those? There was like it was the shifters, by the way. It was the thing that ends up being the shifter list. Who remembers some of those?
The price of resources to make pizza.
Price of resources to make pizza. Good. That was one of them. What else? Technology was another one. Good. Another one? Think about the pizza, the number of pizza producers here in Ottawa. What do we got? We got the Main Street ones, we've got Pizza Time, and we've got Pizza Village. Competition, the number of suppliers was another shifter. So if another company comes into town and opens up shop, then it shifts the supply curve to the right again. All right, so those were just a couple. We don't even have to go through the whole list because you don't have to know that here. So let's stick to what you do have to know, is the price of resources. If we're talking about the average level of prices, we just got done saying that real GDP, the quantity of stuff, is independent of prices, right? It looks like this. And the idea was if the prices of everything go up, is that ever going to change my position on how much stuff I can do? And the answer in the long run is no. So if we allow the price of pizza to rise, but we don't allow the price of the workers to rise, we can get that same effect we did in microclass. And that's why this is the short run aggregate supply curve. So at a macro level, what we're going to do with this model, remember this is an economic model and we make some assumptions. A movement along the short run aggregate supply curve from point A to point B means that we're going to allow output prices to rise, the prices of the final product prices, but we're going to freeze input prices. So input prices remain constant, but output prices go up. So we're going to tell a similar story for that. Now, before we even get into the details of the model, does that hold any water? What's your gut? Let's think about the gut feeling here. So if you are I guess I'll stick with the pizza example. If the demand for pizza goes up, business is going gangbusters, and you normally pay your workers $9 an hour. And all of a sudden, the month of what month are we in? March looks good. and business is booming, right? Do you immediately give all your workers a $10 raise? Do you offer as many discounts on the pizzas that you were with coupons and everything because people are just lining up to come in your doors? Or do you keep your prices high?
You don't exactly need to offer discounts.
You don't need to offer the discounts, right? So my thinking here is that you might be able to charge higher prices. Maybe your menu price stays the same, but you're not offering the same discounts to get people in or whatever. So there's pricing pressure that's going up, but do you immediately bump up everybody's pay? No. On the flip side, business slumps. And so maybe let's go shift over to Walmart. So we're Walmart, and all of a sudden, business is slumping. What does Walmart tend to do in order to get stuff moved off their shelves? Discount price, right? It's not moving at full retail. Here's a 20% sale. Still didn't move. Here's a 40% sale, right? Now, at the time they're cutting prices, are they also cutting the pay of their employees? No. The employees stay the same wage. So what we're starting to uncover is the stickiness of input prices. Input prices tend to be a little more sticky, is the word, the really sophisticated word that economists use, to describe price changes in the economy. Output prices tend to freely fluctuate easier, right? Upward movement in the price. We cut the price if the times are tough. We raise the price if there's lots of buyers. We can kind of respond to the market. So we can think about output prices being fairly flexible in the upward direction and downward direction, whereas resource prices tend to be a little more sticky. Now, eventually, down the road, if Walmart has been suffering for a year and the business is down and prices are down and profits are down and down and down and down, are they going to offer increases in pay to their employees? No. May they head the direction of offering or wanting a little bit of a concession? Now, Walmart's maybe a bad example, but I mean other businesses, do they sometimes go to their employees and ask for a concession on their pay? Right? The choice might come down to, hey, here's the economy sucks, business is down, we have a tough decision as owners of this business. We're either going to have to lay off 10% of you, or if all of you are willing to take a X% discount in pay, we'll ride this thing out together. All right? But that happens down the road. So eventually, we have input prices adjusting, but it's more slow. So now I want to be thinking about a dynamic process where as the economy goes through its ups and downs, we have output prices that are adjusting to the current situation. And in the long run, we have input prices that will also adjust, but they're lagging behind. They're kind of lagging behind. Output prices change, input prices start to change maybe later down the road at some point. So the output prices are kind of the shock absorbers that do the immediate adjustments, and then eventually the input prices start to adjust as well. So that's the story that we got here. The long run looks like this, where they'll eventually come to equilibrium, where we've only got so much resources, we can only do so much to make the stuff we want. In the short run, though, it might be possible for prices to vary at different rates, and that allows real GDP or output to fluctuate. And that's what we're seeing here around this long run average trajectory. And what we're going to see here is we're going to possibly be moving around this potential. Okay, let me write some of that down. I kind of like pointing to that, but I don't want to block the view a little bit. All right, so the short run aggregate supply curve, the SAS, shows a possible positive relationship between higher price levels and higher real GDP. Notice I didn't put the P here, just Y, real GDP. So we'll start to shrink up the real GDP. I should put that down here. Given resource prices and technology are unchanged or fixed. So to put it in a little bit different words that you might see on your homework or on a test is that along a given short-run aggregate supply curve, along a given short-run aggregate supply curve, resource prices parentheses like wages are fixed. All right, let's put a little more meat on the bones. Let's just say, for the heck of it, that at point A, the price level is 100, and at point B, the price level is 108. Right. Okay, so first of all, how much have prices gone up by? What's the inflation rate been? And I'm assuming we're moving from A to B, 8%, right? So remember that inflation is the percentage change in the price level. New number minus the old number divided by the old number. 108 minus 100 equals 8. 8 divided by 100 equals 0.08. Slide the decimal place over a couple spots. We got 8% inflation. However, we did not allow wages to move. Let's just say, for easy numbers, that the nominal, big W, the nominal wages being paid to the workers were $10 an hour. So along this curve, wages were constant at 10. All right, so that's the setup. And then we could talk about oil prices or some other thing. But we're going to primarily focus in on wages to get us started. All right, does anybody have any questions so far on the setup? I want to put a few more words down on what we talked about, the lagging thing. So, note, the idea is that input prices, or input price adjustment, lags behind output price adjustment. Input price adjustment lags behind output price adjustment. So prices on the shelves change quickly, change first, and then resource prices change later. Resource prices are sticky. So, an interesting question is, how far do they lag? How long is the lag? A lot of that is what we're going to spend the rest of the semester talking about. So there's different theories, different economic theories of how long that lag is. Some people say it's pretty quick. Some people say it's a long time into the future, and so depending on what camp you fall into, you might have a different policy prescription for what the government should be doing in the face of the ups and downs of the economy. All right, so how long is the lag? I will just leave you hanging. We will explore different theories the rest of the semester. So the table is set. Okay, so I don't know if I want to muddy this up or we still let's stick with this. Our last component to the puzzle is bringing in the aggregate demand curve. The demand curve. Who are the demanders of real GDP?
The households consuming.
All right, the households, the consumers. Is that it? So who demands real GDP? So we got households. I totally agree with you there, right? I just went through the pizza example. Is pizza in real GDP? Is the pizza that we sell on Main Street here in Ottawa, is that in real GDP? Yes, it is, yes. So households contribute to the demand for real GDP. Who else? Firms. How? I agree. How? They need resources, right? They need stuff. They buy outputs, final outputs. They might run to the Walmart to buy something. Okay? So firms. Good. Who else?
Foreign countries.
Foreign countries would. Good. Who else? The government. Now, if you were picking up on all that, that had a familiar ring to it, didn't it? We have households, businesses, government, and the rest of the world. So the demand curve embodies all the players that we've been talking about before, right? They're out there in that circular flow that we put together. All of those parties are a part of, I need my cameraman I lost here. All of those parties are in the picture. C plus I plus G plus X, it's all part of the flow, it's all part of real GDP, it's all right there. All right, so the things that end up being important for aggregate demand are embodied in the actions of these players, our former cigarettes. All right, so before we do that, though, This was just kind of an extra bonus note that are down here. I guess what the heck, I can kind of put this up here. We'll come back to that later. But let me define aggregate demand. The AD curve shows the quantity of goods and services demanded at various price levels. Shows the quantities of goods and services demanded at various price levels. Notice at 108, at a price level of 108, there's this much that people want to buy. At a lower average level of prices, they want to buy more, right? So it's kind of that movement along the aggregate demand curve, that it's downward sloping. Now it's a little bit different with the aggregate demand curve as it was compared to at the micro level, because we're talking about all goods and services. If we have a change in the price of peanut butter, if peanut butter prices go up, we might just buy more or less jelly, right? If we use peanut butter and jelly together, we might just buy less jelly. So when we're talking about the price level of all goods and services, at the same time we have jelly and peanut butter prices changing, right? So it's a little bit different because we've got all prices. And so it is downward sloping. The aggregate demand curve is downward sloping by virtue of two things. One, the wealth effect. As prices fall, we become more wealthier in terms of the amount of things that a dollar commands, right? If you have a fixed amount of income of $100 and the prices of everything falls, we didn't give you any more money, let's say, but you're effectively richer, right? Your dollar commands more goods and services. And so that is the wealth effect. So as the price level falls, you command more goods and services. Your wealth commands more goods and services. Number two, does anybody have any questions on that one? Number two is a substitution effect. Substitution effect. And there's a couple things that go on with the substitution. The first one is an intertemporal substitution. Anybody want to take a stab at what intertemporal means?
Like different kinds of the same product?
No.
Okay.
Temporal is time, yes. So it's substitution over time. So instead of buying it today, I have the opportunity to buy it tomorrow. So the substitution across time can play into this picture. Remember, I said this is a slice in time. And so if prices are lower today, I might be able to use more of my wealth and substitute my wealth from one time period to the next. So there's an intertemporal substitution, subbing consumption
Based on like a change in
over
expected prices.
time. Yes, on expected prices and the actual prices today, I might be able to defer consumption to a future time period. I'm not going to buy it today, I'll buy it tomorrow. So if prices are going up, I can choose to buy it next year instead of this year. people did this all the time with cars during the recession, right? We had a large drop in the number of new cars being driven because people usually can hang on to their car a little bit longer. So it's subbing your consumption over time. And then the other one is foreign purchases. This is our domestic price level. This is the United States jumping up in terms of 8%. So if that causes me to go run to China to buy their goods, right, that would cause a fall in real GDP. So that's our foreign purchases effect, subbing foreign goods for domestic. Okay, so what we've set up here is the granddaddy of macro is aggregate demand, aggregate supply in the short run, aggregate supply in the long run. And so now the fun begins, that we've got the basics down, we've got our tools at least partially built. What happens when things change in the economy? So the fun comes in with the shifting, right? So I can see the excitement in your eyes already. As something happens that the aggregate demand curve shifts to B, now we have some changes going on in the economy. Now we have inflation. Now we have an expansion. Now we have a recession. All of that stuff comes from changes to the status quo. So I'm going to start with the aggregate demand shifters, since it's kind of fresh in our mind. So, aggregate demand shifters. If you want to put a little thing in your notes, this would be a good thing to memorize for the test. Memorize these shifters. This is the nuts and bolts of a lot of things we're going to get into throughout the rest of the semester, not just this chapter. A lot of this is going to build on. All right, so the first thing that I want you to note extra special is that a change in the price level does not shift the curve. So note, right at the top of the list, a change in the price level does not shift. Rather, it's a movement along the curve. That's the terminology that you'll see in some problems and the homework, right? So this is not a shifter. If the price level falls from 108 to 100, people react to that, right? They buy more stuff. So the reaction to that price level drop is already embodied in the intertemporal substitution effect, the foreign purchase effect, the wealth effect. So we are reacting, but it's what we have graphed here. The fact that we've got the price level being measured up here shows us the reaction because of it. So it's not a shifter. It's maybe the best thing to just memorize as part of this list. So the shifters are going to come back to what we started with our cigarettes. So one shifter comes through changes in consumption, which is our C in our cigarettes. And one of the main driving forces here is through taxation. So this comes to us through the fiscal policy, not monetary policy, the fiscal policy of changing taxes. An increase in taxes, little t here, an increase in the tax rate causes aggregate demand to shift to the left or to the right. So if we ramp up taxes, what we're getting at is this is either going to shift to the right or or to the left? Left. So if we increase taxes, what's happening that you're saying it's going to decrease it as a mechanism through consumption? What's going on here? We increase taxes and what? Consumption decreases. I want to push you a little bit further on that. Why? What is that thing? What does taxes enter into? There was an equation. I'll help you out. If you can see the equation, it's somewhere in there.
I'm trying to think how to say this properly.
What do we do with our income? What do we do with our income? We save it or we consume it, right? What kind of income are we talking about after we got a little bit more sophisticated, adding a government into the picture, for instance? We earn a $1,000 paycheck at work, our gross pay is $1,000, and what ends up in our little hands at the end to go spending with? 800, right? Or whatever your tax rate is. So the government takes a couple $100 off of it before it gets to you. If they increase taxes, that's going to reduce your disposable income and cause you to consume less. And by the way, it'll cause you to save less as well, assuming savings is a normal good. So you'll probably ramp down both your consumption and your savings. All right, so an increase in taxes leads to a decrease in disposable income, which leads to a decrease in consumption, which is a decrease in aggregate demand, a shift to the left. So your gut feeling was right here, but it's important to get those details. A shift to the left of the aggregate demand curve. If you want to put a little note to yourself, YD, the equation, putting our equation goggles on quickly here, we've got gross income minus our tax liability, big T. Big T could be construed as equal to little t times big Y. Let's just throw some meat on the bones here. My gross income's 1,000. Little t is 20%, using Becky's $200 sample there, right? 20% of 1,000 is $200. Big T is $200. And my disposable income, YD, is 1,000 minus 200 equals $800. Okay, so that's our first shifter. We're going to kind of allow fiscal policy through taxation to change our behavior. All right, questions on that one at all? Number 2, investment. Number 2, investment. Investment is going to be driven by profit expectations. So remember when we had the investment category, we were thinking about businesses buying machines and equipment and stuff that helps make other stuff. So profit expectations. If they have an increase in profit expectations, the future looks rosy. That'll lead to an increase in purchases of capital and equipment, an increase in investment, and ultimately lead to an increase in aggregate demand, a shift to the right. Number 3, the government. The first one's the hardest one. So the government spending, right? Which is our G. This one is pretty straightforward. The government goes out and buys some more weapons of mass destruction. Right? They increase their purchases, and that leads to an increase in aggregate demand. Fiscal stimulus. Let's come up with some sort of policy to spend some money and increase aggregate demand. And then lastly, net exports. Net exports, which is our big X in our cigarettes, exports minus imports. If there's an increase in foreign real GDP, foreigners are getting richer relative to us, how is that going to affect our exports? If foreigners have more money, will they tend to buy more stuff from us or less? More, right? So exports go up. So foreigners becoming richer leads to an increase in, and I want to put not X, but rather EX, exports. And that leads to an increase in aggregate demand, a shift to the right. What if the foreign price level goes up? So now foreigners are having inflation in their country, but we don't, holding ours constant. Are they going to buy more or less from us? More, right? So we're going to be exporting more, an increase in aggregate demand. All right, let's call it a day there. We'll pick up on Friday.